A millionaire stirs from his coma, only to be taken aback by the unexpected presence beside him. Brian Belmont, the scion of a prestigious hotel empire, was en route to his nuptials with the radiant and adored influencer Elizabeth Adams. The wedding, heralded as the highlight of the year, promised a dazzling display of elegance and flawless execution. Yet in the midst of it all, Brian sensed an odd feeling, a persistent unease that clung to him. Brian's phone buzzed softly. "It was Elizabeth," he replied, sensing the impatience in his fiancée's voice. "Brian, where have you gone? The moment is nearly upon us. The paparazzi swarm around, and the guests are starting to trickle in," Elizabeth remarked, her impatience barely concealed. "I'm en route, Elizabeth. Rest assured all will turn out well." He attempted to soothe her with a steady tone, yet the strain in the air was unmistakable. He realized his words fell short of soothing her. Elizabeth's fixation on control only deepened his discomfort. "I absolutely refuse to be tardy, not even for a second. Today belongs to us, Brian. Every detail must be flawless." The term perfect carried a unique significance for her. Just a fleeting moment of distraction was enough. The path constricted at a bend, and Brian understood too late that he had slipped from his grasp. Suddenly, he sensed the car losing traction, immediately followed by a violent collision. The surroundings faded into shadows, the wailing of sirens echoing from afar. The shadows wrapped around him, and the visions of a perfect existence faded away, leaving behind a deep, haunting stillness. The stillness in the hospital room was punctuated solely by the relentless beeping of the machines that tracked Brian's vital signs. He lay in a state of oblivion, encircled by a tangle of wires and tubes that appeared to be the final connection to the realm of the living. The accident had resulted in significant injuries, prompting the doctors to make the difficult choice to induce a coma, enabling his body to manage the trauma and stabilize his condition. The tragic news circulated rapidly across various media outlets. In an unexpected turn, the headlines that had once heralded one of the year's most awaited weddings now conveyed a contrasting narrative. Brian Belmont, a struggle between life and death following a severe accident. Entertainment programs have been covering Belmont's critical state, as reporters and photographers eagerly await any news outside the hospital. Elizabeth made her way to the hospital soon after Brian was brought in. She donned a carefully selected haute couture ensemble, her expression of anguish appearing almost scripted. Upon stepping into the reception area, her serious and concerned demeanor was caught by the cameras. However, as soon as the doors shut behind her, her face transformed into one of irritation and restlessness. She swiftly retrieved her phone, scanning through messages and posts, as she mentally recalibrated the implications for her public persona. Nonetheless, her time spent in Brian's room was fleeting and lacked depth. More focused on crafting an image of a devoted fiancé, she only seemed to take photos alongside him, sharing dramatic messages on social media with captions like, "Waiting for you to come back to me," and "I won't give up on us." In truth, Elizabeth's feelings were more centered on the potential effects the accident could have on her career and public persona than on Brian's well-being. While Elizabeth upheld her meticulously curated public image, someone with far more genuine intentions was making her way to Brian's room. Lucy was a young Latina from a modest background who worked as a cleaner at the hospital. Hailing from a quaint little town, she made her way to the United States, driven by the hope for a brighter future. Even in the face of adversity, Lucy radiated a distinctive lightness, her compassionate nature and sharp attention to detail setting her apart from those around her. One day, while on duty, Lucy observed the peculiar happenings in the corridor where Brian had been admitted. She had learned of the accident, just like the rest of the hospital staff, and felt an unusual empathy as she observed that young man trapped in a bed, teetering between life and death. Even though she was a stranger to him, the sight stirred something profound within her. In the days that followed, Lucy started to pay attention to Elizabeth's demeanor during her visits to the hospital. From her vantage point, she noted how the young fiancé appeared only to capture moments beside Brian, seldom lingering in the room for more than a few fleeting minutes. This behavior sharply contrasted with Brian's fragile circumstances, fueling Lucy's resolve to provide support, even if quietly. Thus, Lucy began to make brief stops at Brian's room while tending to the corridors. She would quietly arrange a flower on the nightstand, smooth the blankets, and murmur words of encouragement, as if she could impart her energy and hope to him. Initially, these gestures appeared too insignificant to affect any change, but for her, they represented a message to the unconscious patient that he was not alone. The subtle bond Lucy forged with Brian was so understated that no one at the hospital recognized her unwavering presence. She lingered in the shadows, a silent protector, observing Brian with genuine empathy and remarkable commitment. With every encounter, her presence transformed into a cherished routine, and she began to open up, recounting tales of her youth, her challenges, and her aspirations. Though she understood he might never listen, those late-night dialogues became a sanctuary for her. As time went on, Lucy started to observe subtle shifts in the monitors that displayed Brian's vital signs. Minor signals, seemingly trivial to others, led her to believe he could hear her, that he was battling to return. And although no one else seemed to notice, she felt her presence held significance, as if she could transfer a fragment of her hope and will to live to him. Meanwhile, Elizabeth maintained her occasional visits, always with a camera or her phone in hand, each photo meticulously arranged to seize the perfect moment. Yet, within the hospital's confines, it was Lucy who devoted countless hours to Brian, softly murmuring words of encouragement, infusing the room with a vitality that transcended the ordinary, the mundane, the life she knew. As night enveloped the hospital, the gentle glow of the wing where Brian rested cast an atmosphere of tranquility and peace. Family visits had come to an end, leaving the place enveloped in silence, as though the hospital were honoring the patient's need for peace. In this atmosphere, Lucy, after completing her shift, walked by Brian's room, a routine she had maintained since his admission. There was an undeniable charm to Lucy's late-night visits. They moved with subtlety and grace, and as she stepped into the room, an urge to infuse the space with warmth washed over her, a stark contrast to the sterile and unfeeling atmosphere of the hospital. That evening, she picked a delicate wildflower from a planter outside. With care, she set it on the nightstand next to Brian's bed, taking a moment to observe him in quiet reflection. Brian lay still, his vital signs tracked by machines that captured every subtle change in his condition. As she gazed at him, Lucy was overwhelmed by a profound compassion, an empathy that eluded her comprehension. She leaned closer and whispered, as though he could sense her presence, "I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I want you to know, I'm here for you." Her words flowed gently, reminiscent of a whispered prayer. "I can't fathom the life you lead beyond these walls, yet I sense there is still much awaiting you." Each evening, Lucy would come back, establishing a sort of sacred routine. She sat beside Brian, observing him quietly and murmuring words of support. Gradually, she started to reveal snippets of her own story, as if confiding in a dear companion. She shared tales of her family, the motivations that led her to New York, and the aspirations she cherished. Simple yet precious things. "I come from a small town," she said one night, "a place where everyone knows each other by name and truly cares. Here, it's different. Everything feels so vast." She paused, a smile spreading across her face as she reminisced about her childhood. "Perhaps that's the reason I enjoy being here, by your side. It brings back the essence of what truly matters." These moments took on a profound significance for Lucy. She sensed that her mere presence, however insignificant it seemed, played a role in helping Brian remain tethered to life. As the days passed, she observed subtle changes in him, as if he were beginning to respond to her gentle whispers of support. A finger that twitched ever so slightly, a heartbeat that varied in rhythm when she was present. Subtle indicators, yet for her, they held profound significance. Meanwhile, Elizabeth maintained her regular updates on Brian's condition, sharing photos and emotive messages with her followers. However, those present at the hospital observed that her visits were short and impersonal. In contrast, Lucy was consistently nearby, almost like a tender presence attending to every nuance, even if it went unnoticed by others. One of the calmest nights, as Lucy spoke softly, she found the courage to reveal her own aspirations. She shared her aspiration to pursue nursing, hoping to make a difference beyond just tidying hospital rooms. "I'm not sure when I can turn that dream into reality," she whispered, almost lost in thought. "But perhaps, when you recover and open your eyes, you'll discover something new as well, something that brings you genuine joy." She smiled at the thought of what lay ahead, as if his presence, even unknowing, was a companion on her journey of exploration. As she spoke, a sense of tranquility enveloped the space. There, next to this unfamiliar man who somehow felt so familiar, Lucy discovered a sanctuary for expressing her deepest reflections. In the stillness of the night, it felt as though she could finally be noticed, even by a stranger. Gradually, Brian's room transformed from a mere location into a sanctuary where Lucy could express her kindness and aspirations, holding on to the belief that he was striving to return. Somewhere deep within his unconsciousness, Brian appeared to sense those soft whispers of tenderness. It felt as though his soul, caught in the delicate balance between life and death, remained tethered to the world by that gentle presence enveloping him in warmth and comfort. As days turned into nights, Lucy's routine transformed into a wellspring of strength for her. Each time she stepped into the room, a fresh wave of determination washed over her, as if nurturing someone in quietude could reshape her own existence. Observing Brian, she pondered the experiences they could embrace if he were to awaken. Unbeknownst to her, Lucy had woven an unseen connection, one not articulated through language or commitments, but grounded in the authenticity of her actions and the tenderness of her attentiveness. As the weeks passed, Brian's room transformed into a stage for Elizabeth's mechanical and rehearsed visits. For her, the situation was increasingly burdensome. The accident had derailed their wedding plans, and each trip to the hospital served as a stark reminder that her moment of triumph had been put on hold indefinitely. Nevertheless, Elizabeth ensured her presence, not for Brian, but for the audience keenly observing his recovery journey. She walked into the hospital, her eyes concealed by oversized sunglasses and her expression meticulously crafted. Once she arrived at Brian's room, she lingered for a few moments, gazing at her fiancé as if fulfilling a duty, before positioning herself for the ideal shot. Her social media brimmed with heartfelt posts, yet the glimmer and compassion she aimed to express in the visuals lingered merely on the surface. Deep down, her thoughts were more fixated on the implications for her career than on Brian's well-being. In one of those visits, Elizabeth began to voice, to herself, her aspirations for a revitalized wedding she wished to showcase once Brian was back on his feet. She voiced her thoughts as though he could listen, yet it felt more like a soliloquy than an exchange. "When you're better, we'll host a grander ceremony," she whispered, shifting in one of the room's chairs and glancing at her nails with a lack of enthusiasm. "It will be a spectacular affair, filled with more elegance and attention. We'll draw in even more eyes." Elizabeth appeared oblivious, yet her words resonated with a hollow echo in the space. The conversation about the wedding, meant to embody love and devotion, now felt like her own endeavor, a crafted advertisement. As she spoke, her gaze barely touched Brian. Her thoughts drifted elsewhere, preoccupied with reimagining the story of their shared public existence. Outside the door, Lucy observed the unfolding moment in silence. She arrived to tidy the corridor, yet lingered for a moment, taken aback by the detached tone of Elizabeth. From the outset, Lucy had observed how succinct and consistently influenced by social media Elizabeth's visits were. Even from a distance, Lucy sensed that Elizabeth regarded her fiancé as little more than an ornament, something to be curated for the sake of appearances. As time passed, Elizabeth's demeanor grew increasingly aloof. She began to cut back on her visits, and when she did show up, her time with Brian was limited to mere minutes, resembling a chore rather than a choice. To her, Brian had transformed into an obstacle to navigate, a circumstance that required modification to avoid disrupting her aspirations and public persona. Elizabeth's aloofness only deepened Lucy's bond with the patient. On the days when Elizabeth was absent, Lucy devoted herself to Brian, rearranging the flowers, straightening the blankets, and engaging him in conversation without any anticipation of reciprocation. She sensed that her presence mattered, and despite her silence, she remained a steady force, a reliable comfort amidst Elizabeth's increasing indifference and disregard. One evening, while Lucy arranged the room, she murmured gently, "You know, Brian, it's often the ones who stand by us during difficult moments that truly count. I understand that things may not unfold as we hope, but hold on. There's so much goodness awaiting you beyond this." She paused briefly, contemplating whether she was crossing a line, yet an inner voice urged her to share those words. Thus, she persisted with her subtle, unspoken gestures, rich with significance. The days at the hospital unfolded in their predictable cadence, marked by the familiar beeping of machines, the steady flow of nurses, and the profound stillness enveloping Brian's room. For Lucy, every visit to his room presented a fresh chance to impart a sense of care and optimism. One evening, an unexpected event unfolded. As Lucy arranged Brian's blankets and softly uttered a prayer, she caught sight of a subtle movement in his hand. It was nearly undetectable, yet to Lucy, it seemed like a miracle. Her heart quickened, and she leaned in closer, observing every nuance, as if that subtle movement was evidence that Brian was struggling to return. Lucy entered Brian's room again. Feeling the burden of the monotonous routine she confronted each day at the hospital. That night, the hospital was particularly serene. Lucy flicked on the bedside lamp, illuminating Brian's face with a gentle light. He lay motionless, eyes shut, yet to Lucy, there was an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere, a sensation that quickened her heartbeat, as if an unseen transformation was imminent. Sitting by the bed, she observed Brian intently. Taking a deep breath, she felt an urge to speak, to shatter the silence with words she wished he could grasp. "You know, Brian, life is filled with unforeseen journeys," she started, whispering softly to avoid disturbing anyone in the hallway. "At times, we envision a future meticulously crafted, as if fate has a grand design awaiting us, yet life has a way of shifting unexpectedly." She offered a gentle smile, her hand finding a place next to Brian's. "Perhaps the depths of my being will remain a mystery to you, just as yours may elude me, but I trust that you are attuned to my thoughts and that you will return before long." As she spoke, Lucy leaned in, her eyes fluttering shut for a brief moment, savoring the gentle warmth of his hand beneath hers. In that instant, she sensed a subtle shift, a barely noticeable squeeze that prompted her to open her eyes at once. Brian's hand, which had remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, stirred slightly, and his fingers began to weave together with hers. Lucy held her breath, her heart racing. She remained there, in silence, witnessing that small miracle unfold before her eyes. It felt as though, amidst the darkness, Brian was finally discovering his path back. Suddenly, the monitor beside the bed emitted a distinct sound, a subtle shift signaling changes in his vital signs. Lucy rose to her feet, hesitant yet unwilling to release his hand. She leaned in closer, poised for another indication, any movement that would validate what she had just seen. Brian shifted his head ever so slightly, his breathing deepening as though he were striving to break free from a profound slumber. Gradually, his eyes fluttered open, blinking repeatedly until they acclimated to the gentle illumination of the room. Lucy stood in awe, observing him as he scanned his surroundings, bewildered, before finally locking his gaze onto her. For a brief moment, silence enveloped them. Brian's gaze seemed distant, as if he were grappling with the reality of his surroundings. Lucy, still clasping his hand, experienced a blend of joy and unease, ultimately shattering the stillness with a soft, reassuring smile. "Hello, Brian," she said, her voice quivering just a bit. "You're back." Brian attempted to respond, but his voice was faint, nearly imperceptible. He struggled to piece together the events that had led him here, his thoughts shrouded in a haze, a chasm separating the last memory he held and the present moment in the hospital room. After a brief pause, he croaked out, Where am I?" "You're in the hospital," Lucy said softly, her hand enveloping his. You had an accident, but you're safe now. Everything will be all right. Brian remained quiet, taking in those words as a collection of indistinct images started to form in his thoughts. He recalled the car, the road, and then a void. He attempted to speak once more, but the exertion proved overwhelming. He gazed at Lucy, a blend of relief and bewilderment washing over him, as if he were attempting to place her face. "Do I know you?" he inquired, his breath still uneven. Lucy paused, a lump forming in her throat. She understood that he was unfamiliar with her, yet there was an undeniable bond between them that defied explanation. Choosing her words with precision, she aimed to project a sense of tranquility. "I'm just someone who's been here, looking after you while you rested," she said, offering a soft smile. "You may not recognize me, but I'm glad to see you conscious." Brian's gaze locked with hers for a brief instant, and a profound stillness enveloped them. There was an indefinable quality in his expression that left Lucy puzzled. It was as if, despite not knowing her, he sensed a connection, a serenity that eased the tension of the moment. At last, he shut his eyes, weary yet wearing a look of peace she had never witnessed before. As he drifted off once more, Lucy remained by his side, feeling intertwined with that revival, as though a piece of her had been rekindled. It felt as though the whispers, the flowers, and those countless nights together had woven an unseen connection between their spirits. She softly let go of his hand, aware that, for that fleeting moment, he was secure. When Brian finally opened his eyes the following morning, the harsh fluorescent lights emitted an almost dreamlike radiance, and he required a few moments to acclimate. His body felt weighted, his chest constricted, and his thoughts were muddled, as if he had emerged into a reality that was foreign to him. Gradually, the void in his recollections began to be populated by shards of the incident, the pathway, and then an abyss. The gentle sound of footsteps drew him back from his reverie. As he turned to the entrance, a young woman stepped into the room, her demeanor cautious, as if she wished to avoid disrupting the patient. It was Lucy who, noticing him awake and alert, offered a slight smile, unable to conceal her surprise and joy. Her heart raced as she recognized his presence, looking at her with intent, his eyes still weary yet focused. "You're really awake," Lucy said, her voice soft and inviting, just as she had done countless times during his unconsciousness. "How do you feel?" Brian attempted to answer, but his voice emerged faint and raspy. He inhaled deeply, battling to articulate his thoughts. After a moment, he finally succeeded in whispering, somewhat adrift. How long have I been here?" Lucy paused, weighing her words carefully. She understood that revealing the truth could disturb Brian even more, yet she chose to speak candidly. "You've been here for several weeks. The doctors had to induce a coma to aid your recovery after the accident." Brian absorbed the words gradually, feeling the weight of their gravity settle upon him as he grasped the seriousness of the situation. Each statement added to his confusion, leaving him struggling to arrange his thoughts coherently. His gaze shifted to Lucy, seeking a semblance of stability, something recognizable to provide him with reassurance. "And you?" he inquired, his voice gaining a hint of strength yet still laced with doubt. "Who are you?" Lucy smiled, uncertain of how to respond. How could she convey that, even unbeknownst to him? She had been by his side all along, almost like a silent guardian observing his healing journey. She searched for straightforward words to articulate her presence without disclosing too much. "I work here at the hospital. I was just looking after you," she responded, tentative yet genuine. "Occasionally, I would stroll past your room, leaving behind small tokens like the flowers. I'm unsure if you felt it, but I held on to the belief that, in some way, you were attuned to my presence." Brian's gaze locked onto her, a blend of bewilderment and appreciation surfacing on his features. As peculiar as it appeared, there was an aura about this young woman that radiated tranquility, an inexplicable sense of recognition. "I recall a voice," he whispered, gazing into the distance, attempting to piece together fragmented memories. "It was a gentle voice, and it enveloped me in serenity." "Was that you?" Lucy nodded, her cheeks warming unexpectedly, surprised that he had noticed anything from her quiet visits. Each word he spoke felt like a small miracle, affirming that the time spent together had held more significance than she had ever thought possible. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft yet accompanied by a sincere smile. "I wanted to reach out and let you know that you weren't alone. Even though we haven't met, it seemed like you could use someone by your side." Brian paused for a moment, taking in those words. He experienced a deep emotional vulnerability, grappling with the confusion surrounding his feelings for this peculiar yet reassuring presence. He attempted to reach for Lucy's hand, but his body remained frail, and the gesture was tentative. "Thank you for being here," he whispered, a surge of emotion rising within him. "I can't imagine what I would have done without that presence. It's difficult to articulate, but I appreciate it." Lucy experienced an unforeseen emotion upon hearing those words. She hadn't anticipated any thanks or acknowledgement. Her sole desire was for him to return to life, even if he remained unaware of her presence. Now, sitting beside him as he voiced his appreciation, she felt an even deeper bond, something she had never envisioned when she began her visits. Their exchange was cut short when a nurse entered the room, taken aback to find Brian alert and engaging with Lucy. She swiftly posed a series of inquiries to evaluate his state, and as the medical team sprang into action to monitor his vitals and strategize the subsequent phases of his treatment, Lucy quietly withdrew to refrain from disrupting the care. Yet, even from afar, she sensed Brian's eyes on her. He observed her with a blend of intrigue and an inexplicable sense of familiarity. As he was taken for additional tests and evaluations, a part of Lucy wished to remain there, anticipating his return. By late morning, after undergoing assessment by the medical team, Brian re-entered the room, weary yet maintaining a serene demeanor. Lucy lingered outside, slightly anxious about intruding, but unable to dismiss the bond that had grown so palpable between them. Upon seeing her, a fleeting, weary smile flickered across his face. "I think, perhaps it was your voice that pulled me back," he admitted, his tone raspy yet brimming with honesty. Lucy paused before replying, her smile reflecting a depth of feelings. The journey of silence and waiting finally revealed its meaning. She understood that it wasn't solely her voice that had summoned him back, but rather a profound force, a will to live that Brian had discovered within himself. Yet, she remained moved by the intensity of his words. "If I could help in any way, I'm glad," she replied, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. With one last exchange of looks, Lucy left the room, allowing Brian to continue his recovery. She understood that waking up was merely the beginning, both for him and for her. She sensed that their lives were on the brink of transformation, even if the specifics eluded her. As she shut the door behind her, her heart raced with the thrill of the unknown that lay ahead. The news of Brian Belmont's awakening rippled through the hospital, capturing headlines in local news and social media, igniting fresh interest in his recovery. The news quickly found its way to Elizabeth, who, upon discovering that her fiancé had finally regained consciousness, rushed to organize a visit to the hospital. For her, the moment was ideal. With Brian on the mend, the story of the surviving fiancé was poised for its moment in the spotlight. She understood that all eyes would be on her, a testament to her steadfast devotion. As she made her way into the hospital, Elizabeth smoothed her hair, ensured her makeup was flawless, and approached Brian's room with determined strides. Her face shifted between restlessness and composed assurance. She was certain of her intentions, a brief visit to her fiancé, accompanied by the desire to seize the moment with photographs that would undoubtedly spark conversation. In contrast, Brian was grappling with the challenge of acclimating to his altered circumstances. The time he had spent in a state of unconsciousness lingered in his mind, leaving him bewildered and with fragmented recollections. The remnants of the accident and the shadows of despair lingered in his thoughts like a fading dream. The sole vivid recollection that persisted, serving as a lifeline, was the vision of Lucy, with her gentle whispers and unwavering presence beside him. Now, in the aftermath of his healing, He felt a deep yearning to uncover more about the individual who had remained by his side solely out of genuine kindness. As he pondered this, the door swung open to reveal Elizabeth. She stepped in with a brisk energy, offering him a carefully crafted smile. Brian attempted to mirror her expression, yet an inner reluctance held him back. It felt as though this iteration of Elizabeth, with her practiced warmth, was at odds with his expectations. "Brian, my love," she said softly, leaning in to plant a gentle kiss on his forehead. "You have no idea how much everyone worried about you. I spent countless anxious days, yet I never lost hope." Brian observed that Elizabeth communicated with a dramatic flair, as though an unseen crowd was present. He attempted to smile, appreciative of her care, yet her once familiar and reassuring presence now felt remote, as if it were being portrayed by another. "Thank you, Elizabeth," he said, searching for the right words to dispel the stillness that had enveloped them. Uncertain about the events that transpired during his absence, he felt a sense of relief upon returning. Elizabeth smiled warmly, pulling out her phone to capture a quick selfie of them together. Brian, still grappling with the aftermath of the accident and the swirling thoughts in his head, felt a twinge of unease but permitted her to take the picture. As Elizabeth swiftly shared it on social media, accompanied by the poignant caption, "Love conquers all," he experienced an unsettling sensation. Just then, the door swung open once more, and Lucy stepped in, carrying a fresh bouquet of flowers intended for the room. Upon seeing Elizabeth, she paused and took a step back, but the moment had already passed. Elizabeth's gaze locked onto hers, filled with disdain and impatience, as she offered a strained smile. "Who are you?" Elizabeth inquired, her voice icy and clearly irritated. Taken aback, Lucy replied with a polite response, uncertain of how to proceed. "I'm part of the cleaning staff at the hospital, and I was just delivering flowers to a room." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow, her expression full of disdain. "Oh, I see. Thank you, but I believe I can manage my fiancé now. I don't think he requires your attention any longer. Correct?" Brian felt the tension in the atmosphere and instinctively glanced at Lucy. Her face reflected a blend of embarrassment and sadness, yet she maintained her composure, refusing to let Elizabeth's words unsettle her. Something within Brian stirred at Elizabeth's rude demeanor, a feeling of injustice that demanded his attention. As Elizabeth settled, he spoke up, breaking her scornful stare directed at Lucy. "Lucy had been by my side during my coma. She nurtured me like no one else could. She empowered me." Elizabeth glanced at Brian, astonished, and then at Lucy, visibly shocked. The forced smile faded, giving way to a barely concealed expression of annoyance. "Are you implying that a hospital employee holds more significance than your fiancé?" Her tone was cutting, laced with sarcasm. Brian exhaled deeply, attempting to rein in his exasperation. In typical situations, he would have lacked the bravery to face her. Yet a shift had occurred. The ordeal of the coma, Lucy's soothing presence in his bleakest moments, and the awakening that offered him a fresh outlook on what truly mattered, transformed him, leaving him feeling altered, more conscious. "I'm not saying that, Elizabeth," he replied with conviction. "I'm simply acknowledging what she did for me, and I'm thankful for it." Lucy, feeling the tension in the air, offered a courteous nod and began to exit the room. "I'll let you two have some time together. I just wanted to drop off these flowers and check in on you, Brian. Wishing you a speedy recovery," she said with a gentle smile before exiting. Elizabeth observed her departure with a disapproving gaze, and as the door clicked shut, she pivoted back to Brian. "I can't believe you let that happen," she remarked, arms crossed. "I'm your fiancé, Brian. Only I should hold significance in this moment." A wave of sorrow enveloped Brian. The woman he had envisioned as his soulmate now appeared distant, unaware of his emotions and the journey he had endured. That fleeting disagreement had been sufficient to awaken his awareness. He recalled the evenings when he sensed a reassuring presence, the gentle murmurs that brought him solace. Elizabeth would never grasp the significance of that. For her, it was all about how things looked. "Elizabeth," he started, selecting his words with precision. This incident transformed something within me. I came perilously close to losing my life. In that fragile space between existence and oblivion, an unexpected presence offered me support. The emotions I experienced are undeniable, and I refuse to act as if nothing has shifted within me. Elizabeth stood in silence, taken aback by Brian's resolute demeanor. She parted her lips to speak, yet the gravity of his expression made her pause. With no words exchanged, she offered a faint smile, clutched her purse, and exited the room, leaving Brian to grapple with his own reflections. In solitude, Brian experienced a surge of relief and clarity. It was as though, for the first time, he could perceive his life with unfiltered honesty. In that instant, he understood that perhaps his feelings for Lucy transcended mere gratitude. He felt a stirring within, an urge to improve himself, though the reasons eluded him. The hospital room where Brian lay was steeped in a profound silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. As he grew increasingly aware of his surroundings, a sense of unease lingered in his restless mind. As he awaited the test results, he observed a nurse entering to adjust the equipment. "Good morning, Mr. Belmont. How are you feeling today?" she inquired, her smile warm and inviting. Brian returned the smile, feeling a sense of gratitude for the care from the hospital staff. "I'm better, thank you," he replied, but paused before voicing the question that had lingered in his mind since waking up. "Nurse, I wanted to ask, do you know if my fiancée Elizabeth was with me while I was in a coma? I realize it might seem like an odd question, but it's something that's been on my mind." The nurse, taken aback, shifted her demeanor. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes, as if weighing her words. After a moment's pause, she exhaled softly and said, "Well, Mr. Belmont, Elizabeth visited a few times, but I must say it wasn't very frequent. Often, it appeared she prioritized maintaining her social media presence. Didn't it?" The nurse regarded him with understanding, aware of the effect her words were creating. "Yet you were fortunate. There was always someone there for you, even if in silence." Brian was overwhelmed by the gravity of that revelation. His heart ached at the realization that Elizabeth, his fiancée, the one he had relied on to navigate life alongside him, had abandoned him to endure this ordeal nearly by himself. The nurse's words lingered in his thoughts as he struggled to come to terms with the truth. Elizabeth, the one he had counted on for support, had not genuinely been present for him. The nurse offered him a sympathetic smile before stepping away, leaving him alone with his reflections. The void and disillusionment lingered on. Brian remained motionless, his thoughts swirling, burdened by the collapse of his hopes and dreams, scrutinizing every aspect of his connection with Elizabeth. The following day, Elizabeth arrived to see him. Elegantly attired, exuding confidence, she stepped into the room with a smile and her phone in hand, as though it were merely another item on her agenda. "Brian," she said, stepping closer to plant a swift kiss on his forehead. "I can finally be here without the press trailing me. It's been a whirlwind, but I've always stood by your side." Brian observed her quietly, fighting to conceal his disillusionment. Her statements seemed insincere, a mere echo of the reality he had come to understand. "Seriously, Elizabeth?" he remarked, folding his arms and fixing his gaze on her. "You've always been here?" Elizabeth blinked, taken aback by his tone. Brian usually didn't challenge her choices. "Of course I have, Brian," she replied, her smile starting to falter. "Each day, I find myself returning, concerned for your well-being." A surge of frustration coursed through Brian. He inhaled deeply, managing his tone to keep his voice steady. "Elizabeth, please," he whispered. "I understand you hardly came by while I lay unconscious. I realize your appearances were infrequent, and that, when you did visit, it seemed more about capturing a moment than truly being present with me." Elizabeth opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to have evaporated. Her initial surprise morphed into a blend of anger and resentment. "And who told you that?" she retorted, crossing her arms in a defensive stance. "Was it some nurse? This place is filled with prying eyes. People who have no clue what it means to walk in my shoes. It doesn't matter who informed me, Brian said, his tone grave. What truly matters is that I thought you would stand by me out of love, because you truly wanted to be with me, not just for a status report. I found myself teetering on the edge of despair. Elizabeth, while you seemed completely unfazed. Your laughter, tinged with disbelief, cut through the air. Is this really how it ends? You're willing to toss aside everything we've created over a mere mishap? Have you even considered the significance of what we've established, Brian? The anticipation surrounding this wedding? Brian met her gaze, the weight of sorrow and disillusionment clear in his expression. He sensed that the vision of a future with Elizabeth had faded, if it had ever truly been there. It's not about anyone else, Elizabeth. It's about the two of us. It ought to be different, he sighed, striving for composure. Yet, I understand that our connection is shaped by others' perceptions rather than our true emotions. That's no longer what I desire. She shook her head, clearly indignant, and stood up abruptly. Brian, you're going to regret this, she said, her eyes brimming with disapproval. When you come to understand that you're discarding everything, you'll recall who was there to provide you with what no one else could. Brian stood there, solitary, grappling with a blend of relief and sorrow. The choice to bring things to a close had been agonizing, yet he understood it was the sole viable option. Elizabeth had unmistakably demonstrated that their bond was rooted in superficiality, rather than genuine emotion. He reclined in bed, attempting to soothe his racing thoughts, yet the feeling of void lingered. In the days that ensued, Brian eagerly anticipated Lucy's arrival. Since his awakening, she had been his anchor of tranquility and solace, and he pondered whether she was aware of the conclusion of his relationship with Elizabeth. Days passed, and Lucy remained absent. Meanwhile, Lucy kept her distance, believing that her presence could lead to complications. Following her last meeting with Elizabeth, she worried that Brian's fiancée would perceive her as an unwelcome guest. Lucy was reluctant to add any burdens to Brian, particularly during such a sensitive period, believing it was best to allow him the room to navigate his circumstances. Yet, as time passed, her absence began to take a toll on Brian. He found himself missing her more profoundly than he had anticipated. The absence of her visits, her uplifting words, and her subtle smiles rendered the room desolate and frigid. Each day, he gazed nervously at the door, yearning for the moment she would enter with a bouquet of vibrant flowers and a tranquil demeanor. Yet, she remained absent. The solitude of the days without Lucy illuminated just how vital she had grown in his existence. Brian recalled the instances when he emerged from the coma and heard her gentle voice, the unspoken encouragement she offered when others appeared indifferent. Beneath it all, he understood that he desired more than mere friendship with her. He wanted Lucy to understand just how crucial her presence had been for his healing, and now, he hoped for her to be a part of his new journey. With this in mind, Brian resolved that when the moment arose, he would share everything with her. He wished for her to be aware of the end of his relationship with Elizabeth. Following the split with Elizabeth, Brian sensed an unexpected lightness enveloping him. The choice had granted him a newfound relief and liberation he hadn't realized he craved. Yet, amidst this revitalized spirit, an emptiness lingered. Days had slipped by since Lucy's last visit, and her absence weighed heavily on him. The hours once filled with conversation, the moments when she brought him flowers and soothing words, now felt hollow. Brian attempted to mask his yearning, reassuring himself that she would return before long. Yet, with each passing day without her presence, his unease grew. Resolute in his quest to uncover the reason behind Lucy's absence, he set out to search for her within the hospital's confines. He inquired with several nurses, and at last, one of them directed him toward the area where Lucy often spent her breaks. Brian adhered to the instructions and discovered a serene side corridor of the hospital, adjacent to the supply closet filled with cleaning materials. He inhaled deeply before pushing the door open, revealing Lucy on the other side, her back to him as she meticulously organized products and arranged the cleaning cart. When she pivoted and noticed him standing there, A look of surprise crossed her features. "Brian," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with surprise. "What brings you here?" He smiled, a wave of relief washing over him at the sight of her. Yet a sense of curiosity lingered about why she had been away. "I came to find you, Lucy." He stepped closer, his voice laced with concern. "You've been absent for days and I was anxious. I feared something might have gone wrong." Lucy averted her gaze, her fingers toying with the cart as a veil for her unease. She hadn't anticipated Brian would notice her absence or seek her out, yet she felt compelled to clarify her reasons. "I thought perhaps it would be wise to keep my distance for a time," she whispered, uncertain. "I didn't want to create any issues for you. Given what transpired with Elizabeth, I feared my being here might add to the complications." He wondered if she preferred not to have him nearby. A surge of empathy washed over Brian, mingled with a touch of sorrow as he listened to Lucy's words. He came to understand that her withdrawal stemmed from a place of care for him, yet beneath it lay a concealed pain, an uncertainty that he knew he had to confront. "Lucy, you don't need to worry about that," he said, his voice gentle and earnest. "Elizabeth and I broke up. In fact, our relationship had ended quite some time ago. But it's only now that I've come to that realization. There was nothing amiss on your part." Lucy blinked in astonishment, her gaze finally meeting his. The revelation took her by surprise, leaving her momentarily at a loss for words. "You broke up with her?" she asked, still trying to grasp the situation. Brian nodded, locking eyes with her. "Yes, and trust me, it was the best decision I've made in a long time. I came to understand that my desires for life revolve around authenticity and truth, and you illuminated what it means to have someone who truly cares. In the moments you stood by me, even in my unconscious state, it felt as though I was enveloped in support and protection. That sense was absent with Elizabeth. Now that I'm awake, I find myself missing you more than anything." Lucy glanced down, her cheeks turning a shade of pink. She felt a mix of flattery and emotion, yet she was cautious about moving too quickly. "I only wanted you to be all right," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "I believed that would suffice." Brian smiled, extending his hand to lightly rest on her shoulder. "Truly was. Now, I hope you'll return to visit, so we can share conversations like we once did, or perhaps even delve deeper than before. I've missed you, Lucy, and I can't bear the thought of you leaving again." She gazed at him, and after a brief pause, a smile broke across her face, her eyes sparkling with feeling. "If that's what you desire, I'll be there," she replied, giving a slight nod. In the days that ensued, Lucy made her way back to Brian's room, carrying with her the warmth and joy he had longed for. Their discussions had evolved into deeper, more meaningful exchanges. Brian revealed his aspirations for the future, expressing a longing to embrace a more genuine existence, liberated from the self-imposed constraints that had burdened him for years. Lucy reciprocated by unveiling her long-held ambitions of returning to school, progressing in her career, and ultimately making a difference in the lives of others. As time passed, their connection deepened. With every encounter and every exchange, Lucy's presence revitalized him. Brian discovered in her not just the comfort of companionship, but a source of inspiration that urged him to strive for a more authentic and uncomplicated existence. Lucy noticed her transformation, gradually unfolding. With Brian, she experienced a sense of recognition and worth, as if he genuinely grasped her essence. In his presence, she could embrace her true self, free from hesitation and fear. She permitted herself to envision the potential of creating something enduring, something that transcended the situations that had united them. Let's engage in a little fun with those who merely skim the comments. Type milkshake in the comments. Only those who reach this point will truly grasp the meaning. Now let us proceed with the narrative. At last, on a particularly serene afternoon, as they conversed in the hospital room, Brian clasped Lucy's hand and gazed into her eyes with a look of deep affection. "Lucy, I can't imagine my life without you. You've given me so much without expecting anything back. You've shown me what truly matters. I long to be with you. I desire for us to share our lives together, not just in this moment, but in all the moments to come, wherever they may lead us." Lucy was profoundly moved by those words. Her heart raced, and her genuine smile revealed that, at last, they had discovered something unique and invaluable in one another. A heartfelt connection that transcended any situation. She nodded, squeezing his hand, her smile bright and her expression brimming with hope. "I want that too, Brian. Ever since you woke up, I sensed that my life would never be the same." Thus, without the necessity for further promises or vows, they forged a deep and genuine connection. After weeks of healing, the day of Brian's discharge finally came. He was prepared to leave the hospital and embrace a life that he understood would be forever altered. Lucy walked with him to the exit, her smile a blend of happiness and a hint of sadness. The time they spent together in the hospital had forged a profound and lasting connection. As they made their way to the car, Brian grasped Lucy's hand, beaming. "Lucy, I recognize that this phase has brought many surprises and challenges, and I truly appreciate all that you've done for me. However, I would like to ask you to accompany me on this new journey. I was considering offering you a position at one of my hotels." Lucy halted, taken aback, and gazed at him with a blend of disbelief and feeling. "Work at your hotel?" she inquired, her voice laced with uncertainty and wonder. Brian responded with a gentle smile, nodding in affirmation. "Absolutely. I would like to extend an opportunity that aligns with your exceptional abilities. Your skill and commitment open the door to numerous possibilities. My aim is to support your growth and help you achieve your aspirations. I was considering the possibility of you managing the reception area or perhaps coordinating events. What are your thoughts?" Lucy paused, a blend of gratitude and apprehension washing over her. This was a distinctive opportunity, and the idea of collaborating with Brian while securing a stable career was something she had never envisioned. She smiled with a hint of shyness, still absorbing the proposal. "Brian, it would be a privilege. Collaborating with you is an opportunity one never anticipated. But you know my aspiration is to be a nurse," she said gently. Brian held her hand tighter, recognizing her struggle. "I understand, and I want you to pursue that aspiration. Actually, I was considering suggesting that you pursue nursing school. Seems like an ideal fit for you," he remarked, his eyes gleaming with support. "I can assist with the costs if you require it. What are your thoughts?" Lucy shook her head, a hint of embarrassment gracing her smile. "I appreciate it, Brian, but I prefer to handle this myself. I have always found satisfaction in accomplishing goals through my own determination. I assure you that I will bring it to fruition." Brian honored her choice, yet deep down, he was already aware of his course of action. Unbeknownst to her, he took it upon himself to secretly cover a portion of the expenses. This was a heartfelt gesture, a means of expressing gratitude for the unwavering support she had offered him in his darkest moments. In the ensuing months, Lucy began her tenure at Brian's hotel, swiftly establishing herself as a model employee. The team quickly came to respect her for her dedication as she immersed herself in a completely new environment, eager to learn and grow. Simultaneously, she embarked on her journey in nursing school, captivated by each new revelation and the dream of one day providing care for others just as she had for Brian. Brian observed this transformation with a blend of pride and deep emotion. Their bond flourished, characterized by instances of intimacy, admiration, and warmth. With every milestone Lucy accomplished, he sensed an even deeper connection to her, growing increasingly confident that they were creating something genuine and enduring. As time went by, on a serene evening, Brian led Lucy to the rooftop of a Belmont hotel, surrounded by the shimmering lights of the city. The air was crisp and the night sky sparkled with stars, crafting an enchanting ambience. "Lucy," he started, his gaze soft and his eyes glimmering with feeling. "From the instant you entered my hospital room for the first time, something shifted within me, and these past months have only solidified my emotions. You brought purpose to my existence, revealing the essence of genuine love." He inhaled deeply, tenderly grasping her hand. "Will you be my wife?" Lucy remained quiet, her heart pounding and her eyes brimming with tears. She had never envisioned that this gentle and nurturing affection, which began with unspoken visits and tender gestures, would lead her to such a pivotal moment. She nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, Brian, yes," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Their journey commenced with a new chapter, marked by a wedding that, while modest and personal, brimmed with significance. Surrounded by Brian's family and a handful of dear friends, they made heartfelt promises to share their lives, uplift one another, and, most importantly, pursue a life rooted in truth and affection. As the years unfolded, they encountered obstacles and rejoiced in victories, standing by each other with the unwavering commitment that had always characterized their bond. The union, though modest, blossomed into a profound and enduring connection that transformed their existence, prioritizing values and empathy above everything else. Lucy flourished in her nursing profession, and the aspiration that began as a faint murmur next to Brian's hospital bed now thrived with every patient she tended to. Alongside him, she crafted a vocation that was both her passion and a wellspring of satisfaction. Brian, for his part, always felt a deep sense of pride as he observed her approach her work with such empathy and humanity. Although she never learned of his financial support for her education, he understood that this small act embodied his true wishes for her and paved the way for her aspirations. The Belmont hotel chain, guided by Brian's leadership, also experienced notable transformations. Motivated by Lucy's influence and the clarity she introduced into his existence, Brian started allocating a portion of his earnings to community initiatives. He developed programs aimed at assisting young individuals in precarious circumstances and funded professional training for those pursuing new paths, broadening the beneficial effect Lucy had on his life to a wider audience. Together, Brian and Lucy gained recognition for their dedication to social issues and the understated yet sincere manner in which they uplifted those in their community. Whenever a new initiative emerged, Lucy recognized it as a manifestation of Brian's affection for her, a testament to his wish to reciprocate the support he had experienced during his most delicate moments. The home they crafted together, shielded from the limelight, served as a warm sanctuary where they established their own customs and cherished memories. Adorning the walls, photographs from travels and significant occasions evoked the early days of their shared journey. Every corner of that home stood as a testament to a narrative neither could have envisioned. One day, while seated in the garden, Lucy turned to Brian with a tranquil smile. "You know, Brian, when I reflect on all we've experienced and how our lives have woven together," she paused, as if seeking the perfect words. "I never envisioned we would find ourselves in this moment, united in a life like this. It began so effortlessly, yet it seems as though every nuance was destined to lead us precisely to this point." Brian grasped her hand, mirroring her smile. "I never envisioned this either, Lucy. Yet, each moment spent with you rendered everything meaningful. You revealed to me the essence of true love, and I can only wish that I have reciprocated that to you in the most profound way." Lucy chuckled gently, shaking her head. "You've given me so much more, Brian. You've been my anchor, my closest companion, and my deepest affection. Envisioning an alternative existence feels impossible." As the sun dipped below the horizon, enveloping the garden in a warm, golden light, Brian and Lucy discovered in one another the joy and connection they had longed for. Their life was not what high society anticipated, nor was it filled with ostentatious displays and transient triumphs. It was a heartfelt existence, rooted in love and shared admiration, a life they both recognized as the truest realization of their aspirations. What are your thoughts on Brian and Lucy's narrative? Share your views in the comments. How would you rate this story on a scale from 0 to 10? If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.